Thank you for jumping on the podcast, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Are you from Portland, Oregon?
Originally from Portland, Oregon. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Portland Trailblazers fan, for
Yep.
better or worse.
Yep.
For worse right now. But yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
for sure.
Well, yeah. So I don't know if you've listened to any of the episodes before this, but it's kind of just, tell your story, your situation, and kind of what you went through. And hopefully it'll help another dad out there going through something maybe similar from what you're going through.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, yeah. So I am a dad of an almost 6-year-old. His name is Xander, and he's awesome. He's great. Basically, I met his mom. I used to travel a lot so I used to work kind of like a seasonal job. And so I would take people like hiking and backpacking in Arizona, Grand Canyon area and stuff like that. And never really got into the snowboarding scene, which was kind of like the winter option, when the summer season was over, tourism wise. And so I realized that it was cheaper to go live in a developing country for 3 months than pay rent in the U.S. During kind of my off season.
Yeah.
And so I met his mom down in Colombia, South America. She's American, but we met down there. Then she had just finished grad school and she moved in with me. I was living in Flagstaff, Arizona at the time. Fast forward, and we got married, and he was born in 2017. She was already 6 months pregnant when we got married, so honeymoon never really happened.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those, hindsight's always 2020. It makes you wonder if the marriage was kind of like a requirement in order to have a child
Of
from
course.
A family background point of view and whatnot. I don't know. I don't know whether that's true or not. But yeah, he was born in October in 2017, and we were living in Flagstaff, Arizona at the time. She had gotten a job at the local college. I was still kind of working in the kind of outdoor education guiding world. And the thing about mountain towns, which is kind of what it was, the college town that I lived in, one of the common phrases is poverty with a view. So, there's a few industries that you could potentially be gainfully employed in, but most of it is service.
Yeah.
Tourism, not really a ladder out of that. And so, we weren't really getting ahead. And now having another human being that, we had to
provide for.
Yeah, exactly, all of that stuff just made it kind of untenable to stay there. She got a job up, I live in Seattle now, she got a job up here, which was enough for all of us to move. And basically I would be a stay-at-home dad and look for a job in a really vibrant job market. This was in January of 2020. And so there was
right before COVID.
Yeah, so there was a global event that kind of killed the job market pretty quickly. So, theoretical was a little bit different than the practical in that regard. And so I was full-time dadding, like applying for jobs during his nap time, full-time dadding. That went on a lot longer than our theoretical plans ever thought it was going to go on for. She ended up working from home, and so now I'm a stay-at-home dad, and she's in an office, kind of backseat parenting in a way. And so it kind of just broke the marriage's back, by the end of it. And it was, it was a lot of stresses. My theory is it either made relationships stronger or it, blew them up. That's kind of what the pandemic did to most relationships,
Yeah.
Like a couple either decided to lean into each other or resent each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Either you held on strong or you were going to fail.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so I think it was definitely a stress test. I think back to a phrase that they say in the Army, which is in moments of stress, you revert to your level of training. And, it came out later that it was the first long-term relationship she had ever been in was our marriage and child.
Oh,
and
wow.
So there wasn't a reverting back to a level of training or kind of like a ride or die mindset that you would have with a partner. Like that was never really something she had experienced, you
Right. And
know?
especially after you have a kid, because there's no
Right.
going back, you know?
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah,
Wow.
absolutely. And so we ended up paperwork was filed last October for the divorce. I was able. It was one of those like really tough situations though because we had tried to do therapy, we had done the whole thing, you know, like her parenting style versus my parenting style while still in the same household. It just, you know, we complement our kid in different ways, but never really figured out how to do it together.
So that's what really broke it apart. It wasn't like nothing happened where, you know, someone cheated or someone did something
Yeah,
else. It
no.
just, you guys weren't on the same plane.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Okay.
it was you know, I was hell bent on, you know, I am the child of a divorced family.
Yep.
And so I was like hell bent on not having my kid go through that. My younger sister, you know, dropped some knowledge on me at one point where she was like, the divorce isn't what fucked you up. It was your parents being shitty to each other for 10 years after that.
Yes. Yep.
And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, there you go, you know? And so that was kind of the epiphany for like, all right, so if we're, you know, like, he was clearly feeling the stress in the household, you know, kids are
Yep.
tuning forks in that regard. And so that was kind of the epiphany for me to be like, yeah, all right, so this is probably, you know, the right move for him and for both of us. I can absolutely say that, you know, I feel better not feeling, you know, judged constantly in the same household with somebody. I still have respect for her. You know, there's a lot of, you know, people react the way they do in those moments of stress, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, and so, you know, she made the decision that we were going to split, but I still hadn't found like the job to afford to live in Seattle, which is a very expensive place to live.
Yep.
And so then there was 3 months of me like working one job, trying to find a job that paid enough for the, you know, living wage, whatever that, you know, number was for this area, while knowing that, you know, we weren't going to be together, you know, so it was like this purgatory in a way, which was shitty, you know, in every way.
Yeah.
And you know, ended up getting a job. I work at a college here in the area. You know, it seemed as though it would be enough to cover all the basic stuff. You know, a couple of months into it, I realized it wasn't going to be enough. So now, kind of got the second job. I work Monday through Friday at the college. So it's kind of hard to apply for jobs when your availability is like
So
Sunday,
limitless. Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday evenings.
And do you have, did you get any custody at all?
Yeah, so we are. Yeah, so we went through kind of, it was called peaceful separations. So neither of us were really in a place where we wanted to. Well, we at first we looked at lawyers. Lawyers are trained to get as much as they can for their client.
Yeah.
When either of us weren't really in a position where we wanted to be taking things from each other, we just
Good for
kind of
you
wanted
guys.
to like get to this good place for our kiddo. We found a place called Peaceful Separations, which was basically a paralegal. You filled out all the information, you know, sent it to a judge. They would approve the custody. So we're 50-50,
That's
her and
awesome.
I. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's novel for him, but you know, we're still in the first year of it.
Right.
He'll ask like, are you gonna move, are you and mom gonna live together again, you know? The way I always frame it is like, I'm my best dad and she's her best mom when we're not together. Like, we
Yeah.
weren't great with the teamwork thing, we're always gonna be a family, but you know, we aren't great teammates,
Yeah.
is kind
And
of the
that's
way
what's
I
tough
frame
is they don't understand. They don't get it. You know,
it. No.
they obviously want their family to be together. So like they just don't understand. Does he have I don't want to say better, but since you were the stay-at-home dad, does he have kind of a stronger connection with you? Because it's usually the opposite. The mom's kind of the one raising the children, and there's a stronger bond. Is it that way with you at all, or?
Yeah, I think there definitely is.
Yeah.
Like he and I are definitely on a wavelength that him and mom aren't on.
Yeah.
One thing I learned, especially right after he was born, is the bond that a mom has with a kid after literally having a human inside their body for 9 months is something I'm never gonna know.
Right.
But that's also kind of where there's kind of the setting boundaries aspect of things, which is harder for her than it is for me. I've worked with kids my entire life. Having a kid blows all of those, experiences out of the water,
Yeah.
because they usually get picked up at 4 p.m. and you're like, cool, all right, see you later.
See ya. Yep.
It's like being an uncle, you can be like, hey, your kid threw
You're the
up.
cool
Can you go
uncle.
clean that up? I'm the uncle. I'm
Yep.
not. I'm not doing that. And so, I definitely feel like he and I have a bond. My sources of joy are music and nature, and so those are kind of the two that he and I really bond with.
That's awesome.
Like he and I get after it on adventures, go hiking and stuff like that. Play a bunch of music and jam together whenever we can, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I kind of just feel like those are the types of passions that I want to try to cultivate for him, because they can be free.
Yep.
Like if you can find joy in those things, regardless of what else is going on, like those are still there.
Yep.
You know. And so yeah, that's definitely, that connection is really really strong, with him and I. So yeah, like, handoff days are rough. Like saying goodbye to him is rough. It's a
Yeah.
hard thing. And recently I've been picking up more shifts at my second job, which is I work for the baseball team here in town, selling expensive jerseys to people. Which is nice because I was able to get the schedule I needed, with my Monday through Friday and whatnot. But yeah, I think it's just kind of like year one of single dad dumb, and like
Yep.
as deep in the hole as I'm going to be, and just kind of crawling out of it financially and, emotionally and all of those things. So, I think it's worth it, in the
Oh,
long
at
run.
the end of it, absolutely, it's definitely worth it. It's all
Right.
about it's all about your kid or your son, for sure. And I mean, that's great that you guys, there's no like animosity. You guys don't hate each other. Like that's pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely a forgive but not forget
Yeah.
kind of person, and so I don't really see any ROI on, being, bad to her.
Yeah.
I also think there's a really important dynamic of just role modeling being respectful to women, and him seeing, like, if he was seeing me be disrespectful to her.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really big part of it as well. And so, yeah, my real feelings on the situation, are different than what I show in front of, him and I with her,
Yep.
handoff days and things like that. There was a lot of hypocrisy in like the way that she levied criticism when we were together, and like how I'm spending my time. The irony of the whole thing is she lost her job right after I got my job, and she's been unemployed for the last 9 months.
Yep.
You know, um, and so it's kind of, like that would be that's low hanging fruit. Like that would be a really easy opportunity for me to like twist the knife.
Yep.
But I don't see it
What's the
long term.
benefit? Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So he's awesome. Being a stay-at-home dad was really interesting during the pandemic as well, because he and I would go out, to playgrounds, to different things, and it would be me and all the moms,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they wouldn't really ever invite me in because they would think that I was hitting on them
Oh, true.
nonstop,
Yeah.
nonstop. And so, and Seattle's really interesting as well. Like everybody's got their opinions of Seattle from the outside looking in. Some of them are true, man. Like it's a really weird place. Like this is a place, like what's the best example I can give? Like you're going to have people who passionately defend their right to celebrate Mother's or Father's Day because they have animals. So they're mothers and fathers to their dogs and cats,
I've
and
never
so
even
they're
heard
gonna
that one.
celebrate too. Yeah, it's weird, man. It is weird. It is a weird thing. And so, yeah, that definitely was not easy to navigate. Like it was like as as, stressful from a pandemic perspective as anywhere in the country probably was. Like
Yeah.
people were more stressed up here, for, whether they were right or wrong on that,
Yeah.
hindsight is 2020, but it was like my son was like 3.5 and he would go run up to other kids at the playground and be like try to play,
Yeah.
and the mom would be like, oh no, sorry, you're not in his
Oh,
pod. So
right.
and
Right.
then
We
he'd
don't
go
know where
back
you've
and he'd be
been.
like, dad, I did everything you told me. And I'm like I can't be like, yeah, she really sucks, I'm sorry, dude,
Right.
like.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of those things. And so like that's been the most interesting part, is like his socialization. Like I'm really interested in like this micro generation of kids that, were coming into their socialization at a time when they weren't able to,
Right. Well, like,
which
yeah,
is,
it just stopped. Yeah.
yeah.
That's gonna be interesting to see how that plays out in the long years.
Totally. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like the first job I got was I launched a before and after school program here in the Seattle area. And it was right when the schools were going back to in person learning for the
Yeah.
first time. So this was like fall 2022, maybe
So
2021. I don't
almost
even remember.
a year and a half or 2 years of it,
Right.
and then they go
Right.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to like, my staff, and they were like, yeah, we aren't doing anything other than teaching kids how to talk to each other. Like there's no
Because they
homework, there's no
right.
assignments. Yeah, it's all like conflict resolution
And
and
especially
sharing.
those younger kids too, because they really need that interaction with. It's not even about learning 2 plus 2 and stuff. It's really like
Yeah.
interacting with other children and seeing because you miss the facial expressions. You miss how people are really you know
Yeah.
interacting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I've noticed with my son as well is, for whatever reason, he hasn't had a male teacher at any point in his like educational journey so far. And after spending a year and a half with me, to like go, and I think it's a tone of voice thing, I think it's a demeanor thing. But like I don't know, we just talk to each other.
Yeah.
Like I don't give him the baby voice or the,
Good. Yep.
the kind of consoling voice. And like he direct communication like works really well for him.
Yeah.
So like every kid, like he's, and preschool is such a racket anyway. It's just like teaching kids how to conform. Like
Yeah.
that's really it. There's no content to it, like. And so it was hard for me to play along with all of that.
And that's a perfect way to say it too, right there. To play along.
Right.
That's perfect.
Yeah, because it's like I should play the role of like backing up the teacher.
Yeah.
But if the teacher's full of shit, like it's really hard. And like I don't
Yep.
want to teach my son, like I'm already trying to teach him like, look, man, there are games you have to play socially, like to get where you want to go.
Right.
And whether like you're probably going to be right a lot and adults are going to be wrong, but it's not worth it.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah.
And that's really hard for like a 5-year-old
To try to understand.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Dude, let me
totally.
tell you, he is going to be great. You are teaching him some good shit.
Man,
Wow.
it's a trip. It's working and like taking people hiking and backpacking. They are at their most fragile and
Yep.
dehydrated, and like so you can do a lot of nonverbal stuff because
Yeah.
people aren't going to tell you.
I mean, they're in an
Like
element they're
cry.
not used to being into. You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Now
yeah.
you're just zoned in on a phone.
Right. Well, and also just like the cost barrier to do that, most of those folks are bosses back home.
Yeah.
And now they're in an element where they are not.
Yeah.
And there takes a day or two for them to let go of that.
Yeah.
And so it's a really interesting dynamic that I'm trying to figure out how to like, I mean, experiential is really the only way to do it. Like just spending more time interacting with people and like
Yeah.
kind of noticing like, there's only a few feelings that most people have. Like most of us are pretty easy to, at least guess where they're going with any conversation or with their tone or whatever it may be.
Yep.
So trying to help him out with that, but who knows, man? Like it could be The Walking Dead by the time he's 18. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. He could be
Yeah.
screwed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's awesome. Well, do you have any advice that you would give? I mean, your situation's definitely different from the other ones that we've kind of had on the podcast. It seems pretty amicable, pretty good.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice that you would give any other dads out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's always, hurt people, and so when you get hurt, it's the easiest reaction is to try and, keep score. Try to even it out, whatever it may be. And it's a quick, serotonin boost in the moment. But it ultimately, like, I've never felt great after an argument with somebody else, like, maybe in the moment it was exciting for a minute, but, like, trying to stay classy. And I can't even imagine how difficult it is for some dads with, the shit that they're dealing with from moms, in whatever, environment that may be. I cannot speak to that. I just know that looking back on it, it's kind of, I think about, like, Maya Angelou had a quote where it's like, at the end of the day, people aren't going to remember what you did, they're going to remember how you made them feel. And so ultimately, you can be in the shit right now, but just focusing on you and focusing on your kid is going to be better than, living in the anger or living in the resentment of what that other person is doing. And that is theoretically easy to do. In practice, really, really hard to do. And speaking from the place that I'm in right now, it's easier to understand that. But when you're hurt and you've got the 1,000 cuts and, everything is piling on, it can be really hard to do that. But ultimately, you want your kid to be proud of who you are.
Dude,
And so that, taking the high road.
what great advice. And we talk about that all the time, but I hope the dads that are listening to that, that is probably the number one thing to really really take that in. I mean, you said it perfectly. And the other thing too is, like, your kids will see how you're acting. You might think you're hiding it from them or think you're, whatever, they're not listening. They see what's going on, you know what I mean? Like, they can tell with your body expressions, your facial expressions, how you're talking to your ex. They'll see that, they'll figure it out. But what great, I mean, that is literally, you broke it down perfectly. So if anyone could take anything away, that would be it.
And it's easier said than done. I mean,
Absolutely.
like, yeah, it's easy to write that down and, like, look at it every day, but in the moment, if someone's just poking and poking and poking, like,
Yeah.
it can be really hard to do that. Um, there's a lot of times where, like, his mom makes more money than I do right now, and there's definitely the, I can't buy him nice things, like, narrative that goes in my head as well. And I've gotten some great advice from dads who are, further along down the road where, the stuff that you give them, like, they're going to like that in the moment, but ultimately, you just got to show up. You just
I
got
was
to
just
be
about to
there.
say, it's not even about 100%. It's the time you spend with your kids. That's what they're going to remember. That's what they really want. You're at their baseball games, you're at their soccer games. That's what they're really going to care about. It fucks with you that, oh, Johnny got a new pair of sneakers, and I didn't buy him, mommy, but or whatever it might be. But it's the showing up that really they care about.
Right. And I think it's important to acknowledge, especially if you're living in a developed country, that that's a part of, like, the marketing campaign that's fed to everyone anyway, is that the happiness comes from buying shit,
Right.
you know? And so, like, sometimes it takes a little bit more work to, like, separate yourself from that and realize that you might just be falling for, like, the consumerism thing in
Yeah.
that moment.
Now,
The
what
stuff.
what was your ex over in Colombia for?
She had just finished grad school, and she was traveling.
Okay.
She was traveling, kind of doing similar to what I was doing. And yeah, we met in Medellin, Colombia, which is, one of the bigger cities in Colombia. It was Pablo Escobar's, like, main stomping ground.
Yeah.
So I could have taken, like, a trip to go see his hippos, outside of town. They're just, like, free range hippos now, like, in a
That's
swamp where
crazy.
his mansion used to be. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's bizarre for sure. Um, but, like, that was, like, that I still have a lot of, appreciation for, like, the person that my ex-wife was. I think that both of us, just kind of, like, let the momentum take us in a lot of different situations, like, should we get married? Okay. I'm pregnant. All right, we're having a kid. All right,
Right.
and like all of those things. Um, and thankfully we were a little bit older, like I'm 38, she's 39. And so, the joke that my friends and I like to do is like, statistically, I should be on my second divorce at this point,
Hey,
not my
nowadays,
first
yeah,
one.
probably.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally, on average. And so, that's a big part of it. It's also like I wasn't happy, she wasn't happy,
Yeah.
and it's hard to it's hard to give up on all the effort you put into somebody.
Yeah.
It's hard to walk away from that. And
But the other thing
sometimes
too, you'd be
people
dragging it out. You know what I
right,
mean?
right.
Eventually, maybe 5 years down the road, but eventually that's coming.
Well, I mean, we probably all had friends as kids who, like, after, like, when you go over and stay at their house and they're like, wow, his mom and dad fucking hate each other. Like,
Yeah.
they really don't like each other. Like, what are they doing?
Yep. Yep.
And so it totally is like, do you cut bait, for the health of everyone, or do you put your head down and try to push through,
That's what's
and then
tough.
after the kid leaves, you split up or
That's
whatever.
exactly, yeah. So I was in a situation where my kids were still young. I think my oldest was like 4 or 5, and I was sitting there like, I'll stick this out until they're 18, just because I was trying to have my kids grow up in a 2-parent home and a nice
Hmm.
environment. But then my ex did something crazy and we ended up splitting. But it's actually better to just cut it then, and then your kids kind of grow up understanding what's going on, and then to fake it the whole time and until they're 18, and then be like, oh well, I didn't want to be with your mom for 10 years, but I stuck it out. It's better
Right.
just to cut it right there, and it sucks, but I think that's the way to do it.
Well, I think that goes back to the role modeling too. Like, if a kid is in a household where mom and dad just like stubbornly stay together and
Yeah.
not like each other, I would guess that the odds are higher that the kid might find themselves in a relationship like that later
Hmm.
on, as opposed to seeing their parents make a healthy decision for everyone and, split on better terms. Then the kid is going to, have that resilience or have that experience in their
Yep.
back pocket for when they're an adult,
Yep.
and like, especially nowadays with just like this idea of like the snowplow parenting, like, let's remove every obstacle and every single challenge from a kid's life.
Yep.
And then they
I
turn
hate that.
21, and then it's like, why are kids leaving home? It's
Right.
like, well, you didn't teach them how to do anything,
Right. Yeah.
or they didn't
Oh.
learn the hard way how to do anything, whatever it might be. And so I think that there's a lot of value to role modeling that aspect of it too.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, yeah. I thank you for jumping on and sharing your story. That was great,
Yeah.
and you definitely gave
Yeah.
some
Hopefully
great
it's like a
advice to other
palate
dads.
cleanser. Hopefully it's a palate cleanser for some of the
Yeah.
harder situations that folks have gone through. Like, it's highs and lows, it's ups and downs, like none
Absolutely.
of it's consistently one way or another. But yeah, I would say, 9, 10 months out I mean, there's so many variables, like the custody agreement being amicable, that doesn't make the situation last as long.
Yep.
All of those different things. Um, so in a way, there's like a level of, guilt on my end that, things were easier for me than it have been for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
I think the core struggles are still like the sense of identity, the wanting to do right by your kid, and, try to role model healthy relationships. I think that's kind of universal though.
Yep. So actually, let me ask you this: what made you join the Facebook group?
I mean, I was a lot lower, I mean, it's there's still, this is a whole nother episode, but we still haven't figured out how to talk to each other as guys. Like,
Oh,
we haven't
absolutely.
figured it out,
Yep.
and this whole like, nobody is an island, but every guy was trained to be an island from their prior learning environment. Like, call it generational trauma, call it cultural shifts, and just kind of advocating for yourself a lot more nowadays than in the past. But yeah, like, tell your boys you love them, listen to them, talk to them. Like, everybody wants that,
Right.
and there isn't really the infrastructure on a societal level for that. you know?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of where I was just looking for other folks because I really didn't have anyone to talk to at the time,
Yep.
like the other byproduct of like moving to a place right before a pandemic is you don't make any fucking friends.
Right.
Like you literally cannot make friends in the real world. You can on the internet,
Yeah.
but not in the real world, And so like that's changing now as everything came back, but at the time, it was really just like I'd like to find a community,
Yep. That's a big one
Yeah.
too, is like you need that support system. Anybody. I mean, it could be going online, getting a Facebook group, it could be your brother, it could be your cousin, but
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
to somebody. I mean, it's so important.
I think that's one of the things that makes splits harder as well is women have been creating that community with each other for so long
Yeah.
that when a split happens, there's already that support system. And with a
Absolutely, for
guy
them.
that may not exist,
Yep.
And then you have to learn how to build it. And if you weren't
Right.
given those skills, growing up, and I don't judge my dad, growing up in the 1950s for not knowing how to express his emotions. Like
Right.
his father was from the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of ties to that.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's a really interesting kind of cultural dynamic that I see shifting.
I was just about
Like
to
you
say
look at-
it's definitely shifting, but you can see how it was back then, and you can't even blame
Yeah.
them for that because that's how they were raised and how they grew up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I would say, kind of the elder millennial, whatever, like 75 to 85 generation
Yeah.
is one of the most unique because of how many changes we are seeing where we remember how it was and we're seeing how it changed. Like you can look at it from a digital point of view. Like I remember having a rotary phone. I remember
Yeah,
the first
same.
drug dealer with a beeper in middle school, like all of that stuff. And like going now to like kids who are like, what?
Right.
What's a rotary phone or
Yeah.
a phone with a cord?
You hand them a CD,
But-
though, like, what the fuck is this?
Totally. Like I just did a road trip with my son, and I cars don't have CD players anymore.
Right.
It's just a thing. They just
Auxiliary
don't.
cords now,
So I
yep.
literally bought a Discman and one of those like tape adapters so that I could play CDs for him in
Yeah.
the car, while we were going.
But think about that. That was all brought up in our generation, and it ended within, 10 years, 15, 20 years. It started and ended, and now kids have no clue what that is now.
No idea.
Yeah.
No idea. And there's so many like pockets, like as an example, like I'm a big fan of hip hop. It's the 50th anniversary of hip hop this year. And so there's radio stations around Seattle that are celebrating that. And one of them has been focusing on Diggable Planets, which just released all of their music on streaming platforms for the first time ever.
Oh, wow.
Meaning that like the last 15 years of music listeners probably had no idea.
Right.
that
If you
this
didn't
band
have them on a
even
CD or,
existed.
or records.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
Yep.
now they're like, what is this thing?
Wow.
And so like just these pockets of information that just aren't translated,
Yeah.
It's a really interesting kind of transitional time in that regard. And so, I don't blame, the learning environment that I had. I think that it is still a lot harder for guys to build that community.
Absolutely.
As a result of just like, ultimately we're products of our environment.
Well, you also don't want to show weakness as a man too. You don't want to
Right.
feel like you're weak, and me breaking my emotions down to you or whoever. It's like I'm showing vulnerability, and you don't want to do that as a
Right.
man. That's what we've been taught.
Right.
So it's
Right.
tough.
And my hope would be that the weakness, that at some point the paradigm shifts to the weakness is not sharing,
Yeah.
Like
Right.
That is the flaw. Like not actually telling people how you feel would be the flaw as opposed to holding it all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be like ideally, but obviously that takes work, that takes time, that takes buy-in.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Sure.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much again for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks.
That was
Dan.
great. Awesome. All right, man.
man.
I'll see you
Have a good one.
later.